I'm sorry, I've been on mute. I've been talking all this time and I've been on mute. So, moderator, I think we're moving on to law and regulation. Shall I go ahead and uh, mention the objectives from last time around?
Sure, if you'd like to start with that, that's perfectly fine.
Objective 3.1, review federal law to identify methods that will strengthen existing California legislation regarding the sale of contact lenses and eyeglasses as a means of improving enforcement and enhancing consumer protection. Completed June of 2018. No recommendations on legislation at this time. Does anyone remember what this is about? Because I don't.
Mark, can you read that one more time? Sorry.
Sure, I'm sorry. I'll read it a lot slower. Review federal law to identify methods that will strengthen existing California legislation regarding the sale of contact lenses and eyeglasses as a means of improving enforcement and enhancing consumer protection.
So current contact lens law is if you want to buy contact lenses online, you can, and they just need to wait 48 hours. And so what a lot of these online places do is that they will call to confirm if a prescription is valid or not, and it may be expired, and they will often fill up an expired prescription, but they'll call your office like at 4:30 p.m. on a Friday, and if the office isn't open on a Saturday or a Sunday, then 48 hours has elapsed, and then they'll just go ahead and sell the patient contact lenses. So you have some people, instead of getting an exam every year, end up getting an exam like once every 3 to 4 years because they just managed to circumvent. They just order them online. So that's the one part. And then the other part, I believe, was in regards to the cosmetic contact lenses, that people are just buying them online and there's no regulation to those whatsoever. And a lot of people are getting eye damage from the cosmetic contact lenses, especially around Halloween time.
Yes. And actually, the next objective 3.2 sounds very similar. Contact members of Congress and the Federal Trade Commission regarding the current 48-hour law to obtain information that will assist in closing existing loopholes. Status not started. Board. So this was discussed at the DOC. Please clarify for staff what loopholes currently exist. Board is not responsible for communications with federal officials. I mean, from what Lillian has just said, this is still a problem. I don't recall having a discussion at the board about this or the conclusion that this was done or not started. So shall we add these? So we kind of carry these over to the strategic plan for the next 4 years?
If I might, Mr. President?
Yes.
So we have, as new staff, continued to monitor. In fact, there is anticipated a new Federal Trade Commission rule any day now. We have mostly worked with COA as an industry partner in monitoring those discussions. The rule is not made public until it is filed, and then it is enforceable 60 days after filing. We are continuing to watch that, but simply don't have the bandwidth to have a federal liaison who is a part of those discussions. We intend to make a discussion of the new rule a part of a board agenda in the future, and are looking at ways in which we might approach the optician statute review in order to perhaps enact something that is stricter than the Federal Trade Commission law if within separations.
All that sounds good to me. What does that mean for our strategic plan? Do we just leave it in, take it out?
I believe that we can loop this into our need to, I'm trying to think of my action verb. My first thought is implement, but of course we don't implement, the legislature does. So within our option statute review and the legislative process by which we can change those statutes, we would have an opportunity to find the most direct legal route within which we could make California's standard what this board would like it to be. So I think that in as long and roundabout as that is, I think that within goal 3 of law and regulation, it is certainly to update the statutes of the optician profession, which we have begun, and to work through the legislature to implement those statute changes. And I think included in there is this contact lens rule that will be impacted by what the new rule is from the Federal Trade Commission, and then what our ability is as the state to either supersede or approach that differently.
So to simplify that, my recommendation is to eliminate 3.2 and to modify 3.1. Instead of review, we start off with the more broad words such as monitor federal law, because we know it's going to most likely change. And then we may want to consider modifying the action part a little bit. No, I think we can keep it. So just monitor federal law to identify methods that will strengthen existing California legislation regarding the sale of contact lenses and eyeglasses and means improving. I think we just have to change the first word, but keep 3.1, because that would allow us to work on the things that Shara just mentioned under that.
That makes sense to me. Does any other board member have comments? I'm not hearing anyone. I'm on individual speaker view, so I don't have. Okay, so
I've posted one just to add in this section, and I don't know if it could be considered all encompassing here too. It's how we define the action items. But I like keeping monitor separate. That's just.
All right.
So I think 3.1 is you have the support of the moderator. I think for 3.1 we have the support of the board with Glenn's modification. The next question is Sid has suggested language as for an additional objective or parallel objective. Why don't we discuss that since it's on our screen now?
Sure.
There we go. Thank you. Do we have any board comments, thoughts? I'll start off. It seems very broad, your suggestion. But maybe that's okay. I don't know. I'd like to hear other board members' thoughts.
So I get your point, Sid. So maybe encompassing in 3.1, we could add. All right, hold on. I gotta bring it back up.
Do you want to add to 3.1 or have it separate from 3.1?
I don't know. I'm gonna throw this out to Sid and see what she says. But review federal law to identify methods that will strengthen existing California legislation or introduce new legislation. So I'm just adding that extra piece, or add new legislation. Or do you want it completely a separate bullet point, Sid?
It would help if I took myself off of mute and not talk to myself, but thank you, Dr. Kawaguchi. It could be separate or it could be combined. We just are not really effective in walking the floors, moving legislation through, etc. And so maybe it should be separate so that the monitoring piece is separate and distinct. And this one is more focused on how we take a leadership role and or participate and communicate with the constituencies we represent what's going on more so than we have in the past. I think about children's vision and other advocacy efforts. And I don't know what that means. It could be, again, we build these out. But
So then to replace 3.2, maybe it could be about communication to stakeholders as well as licensees and registrants around federal laws that encompass the sale of contact lenses and eyeglasses, because in anticipation of us knowing that things are most likely going to change from the FTC,
mm,
we are in a position that we can communicate with important parties to ensure clarity to the new law.
yeah,
So
that's a really good point.
Isn't that part of our outreach?
It could be, but if you look at the comments that are specific, let me go back to the comments from the survey. It's everything from stakeholders feel laws and regs often do not support their best interests. The board's lack of power in the areas of law and regulations. Better communication with licensees regarding existing laws.
My feeling is that Sid's suggestion and Glenn's suggestion are on two different
I agree.
planes. Um,
Keep them separate.
keep them separate. Glenn is focusing on the Federal Trade Commission and the contact lenses, eyeglasses. I think Sid, your comment is a lot broader. In fact, more focused, if there is a focus on our effectiveness or lack thereof in the state legislature on things like children's vision, other things. So I'd like to keep them separate. Any other further comments? So moderator, you've already written them up. Why don't we just leave it as is, as you have it drafted, and we can move on. Sid, I mean, just as a footnote, I will mention I did see the comment that stakeholders don't feel like we represent, or licensees don't feel like we represent them. You know, it's a balance. I feel like I represent the consumers rather than the licensees. So,
But, and see, totally agree. So maybe that's where this is advocacy should be on behalf of the consumer, the
Yeah.
public, and
Yeah.
not just the profession. That's
Right.
exactly to one of the points here as well. But it's the how we do it, which is the action items.
Right. Now, we certainly love the support of the licensees when we do the consumer legislation, and I get it. The licensees are also in tune with protecting consumers. So I don't want to make it sound like we're at odds. All right. Moving on.
I'm sorry. This is the moderator. Do we want to see if there's any public comment, perhaps, before moving on, or?
I think we do, because this talks about contact lenses and the dispensing.
Okay.
Dispensing of contact lenses.
All right. So we'll open up the Q&A panel, and if anyone would like to make a public comment, please type. I would like to make a comment and submit it to all panelists in the Q&A field in the lower right of your screen. We're displaying instructions for your reference.
As that's happening and people are typing in, I'm proud to say that in the environmental scan, the stakeholders, board members, and board management cite the board. The board places consumers first in its approach to laws and regulations. So I'm very proud of that.
All right, this is the moderator, and I'm not seeing any requests for public comment at this time, so I'll go ahead and close the Q&A box. And then just a reminder, generally we like to aim for 3 to 6 objectives per goal area. I mean, if you can't think of any more, or you don't think any more are necessary, then obviously that's that. But just throwing that out there, that's usually our recommendation. All right. So I guess we'll go.
Board members, if I may, I think that this is where we very clearly call out our current and future action to review and change the opticianry statutes and the opticianry regulations. We're in the process of doing that. It is a specific call out within the statute that gave us authority over opticianry. And once we have finished the occupational analysis for unlicensed assistants, we will certainly be combining that information with our OAs on SLDs and CLDs to determine if there is a change that is needed in the encompassing. So we've begun a cleanup so as to have a starting spot to come back to that to that discussion with all three occupational analyses in our pocket. So perhaps this is where we say that we, are, but move through the current cleanup of optician statutes and regulations, and then also begin a review of opticianry as a whole through the lens of our three occupational analyses.
Okay, so this is the moderator. So it sounds like we could add an objective, something like update or review and update, maybe as the action verbs. What you just said, Shara, would review and update capture be a good verb for what you just said?
I think that we've completed review. So now this really is advocate for adoption of new opticianry statutes opticianry statutes and regulations.
Okay, so advocate for adoption of new opticianry
statutes and regulations.
Okay.
To and the benefit would be to improve the understanding of the regulation of the profession for the the Attorney General's office, staff, and licensees.
Okay. For the Attorney General's office's staff and licensees.
Our own individual board staff. So AG staff, so I was just saying the Attorney General's office, board staff, and licensees.
Okay, AG office staff, board staff, and licensees.
Great. Do we have any comment or suggestions to Shara's language? I mean, Shara, this is what we're going to be doing tomorrow, right? I mean, it's the first step. Tomorrow is one of the first steps. Well, opticianry statutes and regulations. So I'm saying we're doing it already. That's great. Let's put it in.
Which is why I'm saying that it's not a matter of review, it's a matter of advocate. So yes, our hope is that tomorrow the board will approve the package of statutes and regulations, and then the staff will move to the step of having that adopted into a legislative proposal or being a part of our review. And so there will need to be continued advocacy and negotiation in how those are adopted.
So I think without objection, we should include that on this list here. That probably subsumes old objective 3.3, but let me read it for you anyway, in case there's something else you want to add. Objective 3.3, continue prioritization for review and updates to existing statutes, legislation, and regulations for both optometry and dispensing opticians in order to identify whether or not they are the cause of enforcement delays and determine promulgation of new regulations. It was completed in December of 2018. We, let's see, DOC and board were working on regulatory amendments for the RDO disciplinary guidelines and existing optometry disciplinary guidelines. I think we did that. Approve regulatory amendments, sponsor SB 1386. And DOC staff reviewed and proposed changes to optician statutes in 2019 and 2020. So that last bullet point I'm seeing that is encompassed by Shara's amendment or addition.
Might I think that we can continue to prioritize to review and updates to existing statutes, legislation, and regulation within the light of the three informed by the three occupational analysis that we've commissioned within opticianry. So I think that we can really tighten that up and make that about the work that we will certainly be doing in the next couple of years, evaluating those three occupational analyses: the contact lens, spectacle lens, and unlicensed assistants.
All right, so let me read what I think you said. Continuing, prioritize for review and updates to existing statutes, legislation, regulations informed by occupational reviews of opticianry, or help me out, Shara.
Yes, no. I think that's yes. I think that's where we're getting. Yes.
So, moderator, in the issue, I think you need to take out optometry because we're focusing on the dispensing opticians, and it has to be based on the occupational reviews, or based on occupational reviews.
Okay.
And I think that our benefit would be to eliminate confusion among consumers and to provide better consumer protection. For those who are seeking opticianry services.
Any comments or objections to that?
Perhaps we want to take a little bit of public comment on these last two.
Okay.
Yes.
Let me go ahead and open up the queue.
Yeah, while we're opening that, can I ask you about the eliminate confusion amongst consumers? Could we just go straight to provide better consumer protection?
Sounds good to me.
Certainly.
And this is the moderator. I have opened up the Q&A panel. For any members of the public that would like to make a comment, please type. I would like to make a comment in the Q&A panel and send it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference as well.
Did we keep the amendment to 3.1? Because I'm not seeing that. I didn't see that on our list. Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah, we had to move on to an additional spreadsheet. All right, so I'm not seeing any requests for public comment at this time. So shall I go ahead and close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, thanks.
All right, objective 3.4 from last time, continue partnering with the medical board to identify potential loopholes regarding online and kiosk refraction administration to enhance consumer protection. I'm guessing that the medical board is totally out of this aspect of our work, and so perhaps this objective is obsolete.
I think so. I think we could take it out because it'll probably end up encompassed with telehealth, telemedicine.
Okay, let's move on then to objective 3.5. I agree with Glenn. Objective 3.5 from last time, review current methods, explore new opportunities to increase access to care, e.g. scope of practice, mobile clinics, new technology, telemedicine, period. Shall we just copy that over. Any objections or thoughts by members of the board?
I'd copy it over, but I have an addition I want to throw in there, which sort of ties into 3.4.
Go ahead.
I'm wondering, my action verb is explore. The feasibility of remote methods of eye care, such as computer eye examinations or assisted eye exams, like kiosk type eye exams. During this, don't put the during this stuff in, but during this pandemic, there have been practices in other states which have, you know, they've had assistants operating instrumentation and equipment from rooms, and the physician or the optometrist off-site has been monitoring what's being done, and, you know, automated refractions. They've had assistants dilating people and then using video technology to evaluate the health of the eyes. It's being done right now, and for the most part, it's not permitted in California. And in certain areas, I think it might be something to evaluate, where it could be beneficial, especially in the time of a pandemic, or when we get to times when we're talking about areas that are woefully underserved.
So David, would those suggestions be encompassed if we were to add more examples under the EG in the paragraph that includes scope of practice, mobile clinics, new technology, telemedicine, and the other things that you mentioned?
I think, you know, right, going back to, hold on, I just lost my connection here. Hang on, am I still on?
We can hear you.
Hear you.
Okay. Everything vanished. Oh, there it's back. You know, right now, physicians or ophthalmologists, for instance, as we all know, they have assistants working in a number of optical locations, operating computerized instrumentation to get new eyeglass prescriptions. So they might go to Bill's Optical, and Bill's Optical has a little area set aside which is subleased to a physician, and that physician hires an assistant, and the assistant does refractions on a computer, and the physician, you know, remotely signs off on a prescription, and it's all good and legal, and that patient can go ahead and get glasses at Bill's Optical. Optometrists can't do anything like that, and I think it's to the detriment of the consumer. So I'm not sure how to word this, but I'd like to try to get something where we research ways to explore ways to allow optometrists to perform remote examinations, whether it's through a kiosk type setup or having an assistant or some other person operate the equipment under the distance supervision of an optometrist.
So you're talking like about investigating technology to allow access to remote examinations?
Isn't that exactly what I just said?
Yes, that is exactly what you just said, David. And to the benefit of consumers.
Yes, you put my thoughts into, you've closed my thoughts with words, Lillian. So what we were sitting there thinking of as a bad thing, now with the advent of this wonderful pandemic, it might actually be something which is a good thing, or at least an alternate thing that we might not want to work against, but might work towards accepting and regulating.
So,
do we
moderator, so we just want to write investigate technology to,
Was it technology for optometrists to perform remote examinations?
To perform remote examinations, and the reason would be to enhance consumer access to eye care.
Mhm.
Hey, Dave, are you suggesting that as a separate separate bullet, or to be combined with the one that we were working on?
I would
don't know.
combine that.
It could fit within 3.5, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's like current methods and explore new opportunities and technology, right? So current methods and explore new opportunities and technology, and it's to increase access to care.
Yeah. So it was technology for optometrists to perform remote examinations. So I'm not doing the typing, my assistant is, so we're working together here.
I thought Lillian was suggesting that we incorporate it in the line above it.
Correct. Because
Okay.
it says view and then says current methods and explore new opportunities. And I think if we just add in technology,
Okay.
then that covers a really wide area.
Okay.
And then
I'm sorry.
and then for the benefit to increase access to care and allow for remote practice.
I would just write scope of, you could just write new technology, telemedicine, comma, remote access, and just leave it more broad. Because again, technology keeps on changing so fast on us.
Okay.
And actually, this way, instead of trying to work with the med board to eliminate kiosks, where we don't even have to deal with the med board, and we can work to enhance and regulate remote exams and potentially kiosk type exams, because it's going to happen.
Okay.
So where it says current methods, do we want to say current methods of examination, or do you think it's fine just saying current methods?
Right.
I think we need to eliminate the word current and replace it, because we're also talking about emerging technology.
Okay.
Do you want methods of eye care or methods?
Methods,
Maybe
opportunities,
just the word
related to eye
explore.
care.
But wouldn't we want to review the current methods and how it can integrate or progress into something new? So we have to review what we have currently in order to move forward.
But that's one of the tasks. The task 1 would be review current methods. Task 2 would be.
Could you say current and new methods?
Current and potential methods.
That's where the word emerging would come in.
Okay, there you go.
Emerging methods.
Current and emerging methods, opportunities, and technology. Okay.
There we go.
And under benefits, it would be to increase access to care while maintaining a standard of care, a standard of optometric care.
While maintaining world-class standard of optometric care. Don't we use world-class somewhere else?
Somewhere.
I think in our vision.
All right, so maybe pretty good optometric care.
All right.
Board members, if I may, I think we should also include in this list of objectives the very unsexy work of getting into place regulations for AB 458 and for AB 869. I'm sorry, 896. I apologize. The mobile practice bill.
But that to me is getting into the details. Then why? Yeah, because it's covered with mobile clinics, new technology. Then these are only for examples.
Simply because there will be the needed specific work to engage stakeholders and to negotiate regulations that will be separate from an explore or a review, or continue to prioritize. I think that I'm basically looking to recognize the immense amount of work that it will take to develop, review, and then implement the regulatory packages for both of those pieces of legislation.
And well, maybe, but this is for 4 years, so maybe not call out those two, but come up with a statement relative to just the upcoming legislation, current and upcoming legislation, if that's the goal, is to get more people involved or to advance public awareness or whatever it is, I would recommend that we keep it again broader, because
So my suggestion is that because the language on this particular line item is it's so pretty and compact that we encompass Shara's request in a separate line. What do you think, Shara? You don't like it?
No, I do, because I think that there's got to be a recognition that, on the implementation of AB 443, the immunization bill, we've been working on that since the February meeting of 2019. So simply the drafting of language, and then the period that of pre-work that we put in before putting a regulatory package to the Office of Administrative Law, really getting that stakeholder feedback. That really is going to be a good chunk of work for our policy analyst and myself over the next 3 years as we implement 458, as we develop, because we have not started to develop regulatory language for that. And then also the mobile clinic bill, that will take a good deal of staff time to draft, bring to the board for clarification, revise, and then finally bring to OAL and the specific process of stakeholder comment in the making of in the approval of the rulemaking package.
So I don't think anyone disagrees with that. Give us the 20 words with an action, issue, and benefit, so we can put that in for the next line.
Great, sorry. So if we were to, I think I keep using implement.
Start with implement, and we'll see where it goes.
Implement effective regulations to administer or to regulate or oversee. And actually, this would still be part of the issue, because everything's to provide better consumer protection, blah, blah, blah. For those who are seeking optometric care. Effective regulations, no, that's effective regulations to regulate. Nope.
To oversee?
Yes.
Okay.
To oversee the staff can also chime in. Mark, you got any great words sitting there on your tongue?
You're talking about 896 right now, right?
896 and 458. Yes, so both are practice outside of
Right.
the office setting. Implement effective regulations to oversee. I guess it could just simply be practice within mobile clinics and home.
If we're talking about 896, objective 3.8 from last time was to stabilize the long-term optometry fund condition.
Which hopefully will 896, of course, began as just that component, but now, of course, also includes the amendments that we've negotiated with Vision to Learn and other vision providers in order to allow mobile clinics.
Oh, right.
This is Mark. I would offer the word promulgate instead of implement.
Hey, thank you, sir. So I think that's effective regulations to oversee practice within mobile clinics and home settings.
Is there a different word than oversee?
Regulate, since we're not using or we are. No, that's true.
Yeah. Corrective regulations to,
Or you could say promulgate to effectively regulate the practice within mobile clinics and home settings.
that's a good idea.
So promulgate, actually,
Promulgate regulations to effectively. Is that what you were saying?
right. Yeah, promulgate regulations to effectively. I was trying to avoid using the word regulate again.
Well, at the risk of because of our time constraints, why don't you leave it as is right now? Solid people, you can think about other words you might want to use. I'm just looking at the clock and wanting to make sure that we get through this before midnight tonight. So
Sure.
I think that just before we move on, Tricia, if we can make sure your co-moderator will change I apologize, the outcome.
Okay. So that just the outcome part.
Yes, just the outcome part, so that it's optometry services rather than opticianry services.
Okay. Thank you.
So moving forward, let's see now. Where was I? Okay, objective 3.6. Review and identify existing practice requirements with regard to unnecessary licensing barriers in an effort to reduce barriers to entry, enhance consumer access care, maintain consumer protection. Completed January 2019. We sponsored SB 1386 to repeal Business Professionals Code 3077 about branch. Is that the branch office? I can't remember now.
Yes.
So I'm going to suggest that we do not include this as an objective. I think this is something we keep in the back of our minds anyway. But in terms of setting off staff to start looking at more licensing barriers, I don't know. How do people feel about that? Shall we move on?
No, I've got something for you
Okay.
to throw out. So, again, dealing with our current situation and what we had discussed previously regarding new graduates, I was wondering if it's worthy looking at something like using the action verb formulate. Legislation to allow for graduates to work under the supervision of a licensee when testing is disrupted. Again, we're talking about the current situation with COVID. And doing that to remove barriers to practice. The thing that brought this up was we had all the med students in New York that were suddenly allowed early graduation to go and work in COVID wards if they wanted, they could graduate early if they were willing to go and work in COVID wards. I don't know if these folks had already completed all of their national testing or state testing or whatever needed to be done. But I'm just wondering if there's a way under times of state or local emergencies, pandemics, earthquakes, major disasters, where we could have some legislation that would allow people who are newly graduated to work for a limited amount of time directly under the supervision of a current licensee without having gone through all of the necessary CLRE, or well, they could have the CLRE, but maybe not yet completing their national boards. They've already graduated from school. They just might not have completed the national boards.
But wouldn't they just be working as a tech and then they can still do that? You just have to co-sign all their charts.
No,
You're taking the liability for it.
Well, you'd be taking the liability, but I'm saying they'd be working as an optometrist. They'd be doing refractions, doing ophthalmoscopy, doing everything. But the person, just like right now when you sign off on, you do, your student does an exam and you sign off on it. Same basic type of thing to work out in the real world instead of at school under somebody else's license. Again, only in times of an emergency when you can't readily do the normal licensing procedures.
Right, but the problem is that those people would then have to get malpractice insurance because the doctor's malpractice insurance won't cover them. So unless they can get malpractice insurance to cover them during these times of emergency, I don't think that would work. I mean, that's just the logistics part of it.
No, but that's a very valid logistics part. So,
Because otherwise, they're just a tech. I mean, you can hire anyone to do all that stuff, and if you're co-signing the chart, then they're just being your technician. But it's who's going to cover their liability at this point.
I don't
Well,
know if we
yeah,
have
I
to
mean,
worry about that because
yeah.
based on what Dave's proposing, it could be that we investigate. We can use that word to begin, investigate, and then describe what Dave is discussing. And it could lead us to a dead end. That's possible. But I think it's an interesting concept, especially considering we don't know how long this kind of pandemic, or will we end up with another different pandemic in the future? So we could always investigate and see where it leads us.
And going back on my own question or my own statement, is that a reasonable use of staff time considering all the other stuff going on? That would probably be the executive officer would have to answer that one.
Well, we could throw it on the page for now and then discuss that when we come back to this.
And that's certainly something that we could look at in more detail with more data, perhaps looking at, desk analyses and widget calculations in order to understand who might have the expertise within staff to investigate that and the bandwidth within staff to investigate that. And that's something we can definitely do once we appoint the work group and the working of the strategic plan work group that will review this before it comes back to you in October.
And it's possible that our staff won't even have to do a lot of work on it because with all the priority on the COVID pandemic, it could be that legislators come back to us because they're wanting all practitioners to be able to allow this. So it could be larger encompassing than just optometry.
I have to agree with Dr. Kawaguchi. I would imagine that there's discussions at the state level more holistically across multiple practices in this field of enabling more medical care, period, to help during a pandemic or other major disruption. I think this is a great one.
Okay.
And I throw one other out, and I don't know if this is something that could go into 3.6 or if it goes somewhere else or if it's even something that we use. But in our earlier conversation, we were talking about updating laws, updating technology, legislation in regards to technology. There are when we were talking about the current CLRE, the law and reg exam, there are certain things that exist in regulations right now that I am specifically not allowed to put flyers on somebody's car advertising my services, or I can't go door to door knocking on doors advertising my services. I mean, things that might have actually made sense in 1950, but seem sort of silly now at this time. And maybe we need to update that to look at how things need to be regulated on social media, on people's websites. I'm just thinking of ways that we could update our laws and our regs, because there's a lot of stuff in there which is just silly, which people are still being tested on. So I have no idea where to go with that. It's just something that crossed my mind when we were talking about the law and reg exam. I've written those questions before, and it falls in under one of the many terms of professional inefficiency or something on that order. If you put a flyer on somebody's car windshield.
Yeah, I mean, David, that sounds great. I'm looking at the old objectives and trying to find.
I don't know if it fits in or not. It's just something that popped in my head. Lots of stuff pops in my head.
Moderator, I'm sure other boards have talked about reviewing existing statutes and regulations to identify obsolete laws and regulations
And terminology.
and terminology.
Sure.
Do you have any language that you've used before, or between now and the next meeting, can you come up with language?
Well, I'd like to get it up so that everyone can see it and approve what it looks like. But
all right, here we go. Review and update
okay.
existing statutes, legislation, and regulations to identify obsolete statutes, legislation, regulation, and terminology to identify obsolete requirements.
Right, or you could say to modernize, or to modernize.
Yeah, to modernize, to identify.
To modernize.
Yeah.
To modernize, or how about just to modernize statutes and I don't know, to modernize.
Language and phraseology,
or to modernize language and terminology, or
and practice and
okay, so to modernize
in light of current and future practice.
Okay, to modernize language in light of current and future practice. Does that look good?
Does it fit in there to modernize language and media? Because again, social media didn't even exist when they wrote that. When they wrote the
okay.
knocking on front doors.
Okay.
Well, and to modernize, because the language you're modernizing is that which is in the regulations and statutes.
Okay.
In light of current and future practice and media.
But might we be modernizing concepts as well? Because there are certain concepts that are no longer valid.
Sure.
Right.
To modernize language and concepts.
In light of current and future practice. Yeah.
There you go. All right.
All right. All right, moving on. Objective 3.7, explore feasibility of proposing legislation to synchronize the expiration dates of all license types for a given individual. This has not been started yet. Do we care about this anymore? Shall we bring it over?
I'd carry it over because it sure makes things easier.
Okay. Any comment or objection? Okay, I'm going to read the next two, and then I'm going to open up for both board and public comment. Objective 3.8, explore the feasibility of proposing legislation to merge the RDO and optometry funds to stabilize the long-term optometry fund condition. We're trying to do that. And objective 3.9, explore the feasibility of proposing legislation to RDO program into the Optometry Practice Act. So the fund condition, we proposed the bill, and the merging of the acts. The board reviewed the proposal at the 2019 public meeting, but did not take any action.
And I think that here, our initiative to reorganize the opticians statutes is our first step in getting there. And then looking at how we might be differently regulating the practice of opticianry, I think is also an initiative that we would want to complete before we look to place these two statutes in the same act. And I'm not sure, as I've had conversations with legal counsel previously assigned to our board, that we get much benefit out of bringing these two together. We, in changes in these statutes for opticianry, we make it clear that it's the optometry board throughout, rather than a simple reference at the beginning and then the medical board listed throughout. I think that that gives us what we're looking for, and to help folks understand that these are regulated by our board and are linked in a way in their professions, the way in which they service consumers. But I'm not sure that we actually get a whole lot out of simply putting the two acts together in one place.
Okay, so do we want to just leave it to modifying objective 3.8, advocate for legislation to merge the RDO and optometry funds to stabilize the long-term optometry fund condition? Because that's what we're doing, right? With 8.6.
It is, and by all accounts, the bill moved out of Senate Business Professions and Economic Development and a 9-0 vote. We anticipate that it will have the same path through the Senate floor and in reconsideration on Assembly. So I really feel like the funds specifically, we're going to get that done before we even revise and adopt this new strategic plan. I think that we're probably best off leaving off 3.8, and then perhaps in this first draft we keep 3.9, but staff, legal, and the appointed strategic planning work group look into whether or not there is a need or a benefit to placing those two practice acts in the same place.
I'm fine with that. I'm glad to hear your optimism that you think that we're going to get these funds merged. You are
No.
you are very optimistic. So you want to keep
Lots of things can happen on the floors of the legislature.
I don't think we should do that, and because we never know what's going to happen with legislation, so I think we should maintain 3.8 with Mark's edits, but also we should change the benefit, because originally we were worried because we felt that the optometry fund was supporting the optician program.
That's right.
We now have come to a realization that that's no longer occurring. And so it's not about stabilizing long-term optometry fund, it's about stabilizing the optometry board fund. And 3.9, I don't think we're going to get to it in the next 4 years, to be honest. And to Shara's point, I don't think it's that critically important. And with telehealth, telemedicine, that's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort. So my suggestion is we keep 3.8 with Mark's suggested edits, and then not have 3.9 right now in this go round.
This is the moderator. So what we're showing right now, are you saying that we want to get rid of that, or it's okay to keep it?
So keep what you have there.
Okay.
And then not add back 3.9.
Okay.
That's my suggestion.
Are people okay with that? Okay. Why don't we open up for public comment in case Adam wants to add anything to this topic?
All right. I've opened up the question and answer panel. So if any members of the public would like to make a comment, please type, I would like to make a comment, and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference. Okay, I'm seeing no requests for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes.
All right, thank you. I'll do that.
So objective 3.10 from the old set is work in conjunction with all stakeholders to ensure consumer protection is weighed equally with consumer choice, so legislation and/or regulation promotes fair access to goods and services while informing consumers of the risks and benefits of such goods and services afforded. Completed December 2019 and ongoing. How do people feel about this? It is a broad statement of principle that I think most of us or all of us try to keep in mind for everything we do. But I'm not adverse to repeating it anyway.
This was originally brought up during that strategic planning session related to situations going on with a dental board in another state. And our desire at the time to show that we were mindful of this topic and believed in it. So I don't know that it has to remain because hopefully we've proven that that's our belief. But I mean, it could remain as well. It's just difficult to measure.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments or any other thoughts?
Is there anything else in the plan that's going to deal with children's vision? Because I know that, that's a battle that'll be going on long after we're gone, physically and on the board. But do we want to still have that in there as something that we're trying to work on, or leave that out?
That could be one of the key tasks under the general advocacy, that wide-ranging line item. That's where I think it should be called out because it is so long-term.
Okay.
So let's leave it in. I think this is where children's vision fit in before. The comment underneath the progress report says work with stakeholders regarding mobile optometric practice, repealing branch office law, sponsoring legislation devoted to children's vision, and improving the RDO program.
Well, we can get rid of repealing the branch office license law because that's been done. We are still actively working with mobile optometric practice, even with 896 once it's, but we're working on it right now. So, I mean, yeah, I think it would get rid of the branch office law.
Well,
it's still ongoing.
The language I just quoted is just kind of a status report, so it's not part of the objective, but just staff saying this is what we've done on it. But I think your comment supports bringing over or continuing with 3.10, the broader statement.
Okay.
This is the moderator, and I'm not sure if my co-moderator can talk or not, but she was saying this is more of a policy statement. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Yeah, I get that, but I guess my response is, so what? So what if it's a policy statement? Where does it go? Does it? Where would it go in the strategic plan then? If it's a policy statement.
Sure. So when doing strategic plans, something you want to try to avoid is including items that are business as usual. So if this is just a business as usual item, then it wouldn't need to be included in the strategic plan.
This plan will be reviewed when we're under sunset review, right?
Yes, this is something that is, your strategic plan is part of the sunset review.
But the one that we're looking at now, not the one that we're creating.
Oh,
So, I mean, if our strategic plan, the one that expires this year, is reviewed by the legislature and they ask, well, what happened with children's vision? And why aren't you pursuing it in your upcoming strategic plan? We wouldn't really have an answer for that, would we?
Well, the answer would be whatever answer we have. I mean, whether it's in the new strategic plan or not, we would have to answer, well, this is what we're doing on children's vision.
Hi, this is the co-moderator.
Yes.
My comment regarding the policy statement was in reference to 3.10 from
Yes.
your current strategic plan.
Yes.
And if this is something that is more of a statement of your beliefs and not necessarily something that is actionable, you could have the president include it in their message that prefaces in the beginning of your strategic plan. You could just take out the work in conjunction with, and you can just put, it is our goal to ensure consumer protection is weighed equally, blah, blah, so on and so forth.
Okay. My concern was that somebody looks at this and says, why are you not working on children's vision anymore? Why'd you give up?
So, moderators, could you make a note that we'll try doing what you've just suggested? And again, we can always revisit that.
sure, I'll make a note of that.
Thank you. Objective 3.11, develop, implement a new inspection program using best practices from other existing programs within DCA. If necessary, sponsor approved legislation or regulatory amendments to improve inspection authority language. April 2018, the board voted to postpone implementation and allow staff to compile a report about the enforcement effectiveness and cost benefit. This is still in progress. I don't know. I'm assuming we want to keep this on here.
Based on stakeholder feedback, I think we need to. So there was some stakeholder feedback around this specific topic.
I'm sorry, Glenn, I couldn't hear you. You were breaking up.
Oh, so there was some stakeholder feedback around this specific topic. So I think that it should be kept.
That makes sense to me. Shara, can you remind us where we are on this?
Certainly. So, in forming the work group and in discussions with enforcement staff, we took a good deal of time to analyze the sorts of complaints that we receive. Very infrequently are they about the cleanliness or equipment within an optometry office or an optician setting. They are about the conduct of the individual professional, and that the inspection, while a program that needs a good deal of staff power, a good deal of structure to it, wouldn't really address the main complaints, consumer complaints that we receive here at the board. Those come back to standard of care. They come back to a need to review patient records, and our inspection authority does not include patient records. Those can only be obtained through a waiver of that individual patient. So it came to a feeling that the inspection authority is an excellent thing to have, but it doesn't at this point address the majority of consumer complaints, or the vast majority of consumer complaints received here at the board.
On the basis of that, I'd like to have this objective carried over, but I think I'd like to change some of the language because it seems like it's up in the air whether we're going to actually implement it. But we need to have some closure to hear from staff as to their evaluations. Seems to be.
Well, I apologize, sir. I do think that there was, I mean, we have noted within here, there was a full board vote in April of 2018 to postpone implementation. Staff is still of the opinion that enforcement effectiveness and cost benefit analysis proactive inspectors would not be to the benefit of the enforcement program.
Okay. Well, I guess my point is I don't recall seeing that report. So that has to happen. But that can happen without having it put into the strategic plan. So, okay. I mean, if I have commitment from the staff,
Certainly.
we'll get a report on that, then we don't have to put it into this long-term strategic plan. All right. Board, any thoughts on these listed objectives? Does anyone want to add objectives that weren't from the last strategic plan? I'll open it up to the board and then I'll open it up to the public. Okay, hearing nothing from the board, let's open it up for public comment. One more time for law and regulation.
Sure, this is the moderator, and the Q&A feature is now available. So if anyone would like to make a comment, please type. I would like to make a comment and submit it to all panelists, and we are displaying instructions for your review.
Nothing?
I am seeing nothing. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right.
All right, so we have enforcement, outreach, and organizational effectiveness. It's 3:30. I'm optimistic that we can get through this. We also have probably 20 minutes of closed session we have to go through. So
Excellent.
Let's hunker down here. But I'm optimistic. All right. And if anyone has suggestions on how to do this faster, I'm open to it, but I'm trying to be kind of methodical. All right, goal 4 is enforcement. Old objective 4.1. Review enforcement timing between initial offense and when it is conveyed to the board to act upon in order to protect the consumer, maintain patient access to care. We completed that according to this January 2019. I don't know. Any comments or okay? Objective 4.2, explore the feasibility and participating in the FBI wrap-back program to expedite and enhance enforcement efforts. It's still in progress. Sure, I don't even know what this is about, so. Shara?
I apologize, just getting to unmute myself. So this is a larger DCA, Department of Justice issue that we continue to be a part of in discussions. We are, of course, like everything, this has been sidelined with COVID, but we are still a part of those discussions to implement the wrap back program so that we are sure that we are getting information that comes in on current licensees from not only the state system, but also the federal system.
All right, so shall we just leave it in then, since it seems to be like a continuing DCA project with us?
I'm not sure that it makes sense to continue it through in our objectives. I think that there is limited work that we can do other than to stay connected to the overall department. I would say that it might indicate that this is a good deal of, that we should be spending a good deal of time on this when in fact it is very much a process that is out of our control other than to advocate that we would benefit from it, that our consumers would benefit from it.
All right, so let's take it out unless I hear objections. Okay. 4.3, research the possibility of changing the statute to require licensee to self-report to the board within 30 days of conviction or other disciplinary action as a means of expediting and enhancing enforcement efforts. In progress, staff is researching potential regulations of other boards and present findings at a future meeting. Shara, what do you think?
We have continued to do research in this area. Mark, I'm not sure if you recall your initial findings in whether or not there are other DCA boards that have this stipulated within statute, a mandatory self-report within a matter of time.
I recall working on this issue, but I don't have it in front of me. This is something we could bring back to the board in the future.
I think it would be helpful if staff could revisit the research that's been done and then come back to the board. If this is something that continues to be a major issue, I think, though, that we have in our other enforcement goals really realized that with the, I apologize, the rat back system from DOJ and advocacy for FBI, that we are getting information as quickly as we can. But a self-report could be helpful. So I mean, I could see certainly moving this forward as part of, our review within, at the same time, as our legislative objective, we have our law and regulations is looking at the regulations and statutes for optometry. And within that could be the self-reporting as opposed to it itself being an individual objective.
All right, so I hear that you're suggesting this not be an objective, but just something that is on a future board calendar. Okay, I see you're nodding your head.
Yes, I would agree. I think that this can take place within possibly sunset review, within a larger review, but I'm not sure that it effectuates that much change for our enforcement process so as to make it a key objective for the board.
All right, let's move on then. Research the possibility of requiring licensees to enroll in the National Practitioners Data Bank to expedite and enhance enforcement efforts. This was completed and included in our sunset bill. Okay, let's move on then. Develop proactive methods to enforce the unlicensed sale and distribution of contact lenses.
This is the moderator, and I don't know if it's just me or if it was for other people too, but Mr. Board President, your voice cut out, at least for me.
I somehow hit mute at some point. Where was I? What was the last thing you heard? Hello?
When you were talking about the sale of contact lenses.
Oh, yeah. Okay, there you go. Develop proactive methods to enforce the unlicensed sale and distribution of cosmetic contact lenses.
That's not worded right, is it?
Yes.
Definitely not.
Nah.
So I guess we've actually done what we put down there.
I know this was important to me the last time we worked on the strategic plan. We've done a little bit on it. There was a really great video that Shara and her staff helped produce. It is something we should do every year. Well, maybe not this year because no one's going to go out on Halloween, but whenever Halloween comes back, we should keep this on our plate.
If I might, Mr. President, I think that this really, rather than enforcement, belongs to outreach. Along with the video, we've also developed some materials that can be used for both social media, email, and physical communication, like flyers and that sort of thing. And we brainstormed some great ideas in the Public Relations Committee's last meeting to work with the Convenience Store Association with student health centers on university campuses and community college campuses. So I think that within our outreach objectives, this is definitely something that we want to continue to pursue and enhance, but I'm not sure that it still is applicable here within enforcement, as we do not have the ability to enforce those unlicensed sales.
Well, then how about, and moderators, you can just scribble this down. We can move it to the appropriate section after we have it. How about develop proactive methods to inform the public about the dangers of the unlicensed sale and distribution of cosmetic contact lenses?
So this is moderator, and we can definitely move that if we need to. It sounds like it might be more of an outreach objective.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the benefit is probably kind of inherent in the issue, but to promote consumer safety or something like that. But yes, I agree. It should be moved over to research. All right. Moving to old objective 4.6, establish a partnership with DCA boards and county and state organizations to identify unlicensed activity. Contact lens sales, expired prescriptions in an effort to protect consumers. How do people feel about that? Doesn't sound like there's any excitement for that.
That sounds like such a big job. Is that our primary concern right now in our strategic goals? This could overrun everything that we do.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a priority right now.
Okay.
Do we want to keep it as a goal? I don't know.
Char, do you have any input, since it would be you?
I do agree with Dr. McIntyre's assessment of this. I think that we can make inroads through outreach and communication, but I'm not sure that our time is best served in protecting the public, in seeking out partnerships in this way, rather than actually researching investigating and moving through the consumer complaints that we do
Okay.
sent to the board.
All right, I'll move on to objective 4.7, review the corrective action for compliance and revise if necessary in order to deter unlicensed activity. I don't know what that even says. Does anyone remember? Review the corrective action for compliance and revise if necessary in order to deter unlicensed activity.
This is the moderator, and I just want to throw out there that while it's good to review the old strategic plan, by no means are you tied to it. If you wanted to set it aside and just say, hey, we're coming up with new objectives for enforcement, that is totally something that you can do during this. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
That's a good reminder, especially since time is short. Why don't I open it up to the board and ask the board if anyone has enforcement objectives to add. And as people are discussing it, I'll look through the progress report and see if there is anything that I want to map over, and board members are welcome to too. But why don't I open up the floor?
Maybe open up at the chat window if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, I'll go ahead and do that. So it is open now. So feel free to type that. And the person typing on the PowerPoint unfortunately can't see the chat, so I will read as you type. But it's helpful because it helps us catch everything. So All right, so that's open. All right, so we've got the action words refine, and then it's enforcement processes. Oh, I see that my co-moderator was able to grab it, so wonderful. Thank you. All right. So what do we think about that? Does that look good? Are we good with that?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I have a general comment about the remainder of the points from last. There's several
Okay.
of them that I don't think apply anymore,
Okay.
because either it's folded into other actions that we have on our strategic plan,
Mm-hmm.
or they're completed.
Right. And so usually the old strategic plan, I mean, it's up to you if you want to use it at all. Really, this is a time to look at the environmental scan, which is the new data on what are the identified strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then as you create objectives, you're thinking, how can we minimize this weakness, or how can we capitalize on this strength or opportunity? So if the objectives in the old plan seem to not apply anymore, they can totally be ignored. Does anyone else have any objectives that they'd like to throw out there for us? Or if you want to type them in the chat, that works too.
I'll just throw something out.
Okay.
And we're talking about anything now within enforcement, right?
Correct.
Is there a way that we could action verb consult? Maybe
Okay.
not consult. I'm not sure what the verb would be. Anyway,
Okay.
where we have the enforcement team review, consult, whatever, with a board approved expert, not a board member, but a board approved expert on any enforcement actions which would require probation or revocation of a license. I say this because there have been cases that have come before the board over the years that we've looked at and said this person should never have been placed on probation in the first place, but the decision was made by somebody on the enforcement team, and from a professional standpoint, it made absolutely no sense to do that.
Okay. So then the benefit would be maybe to ensure that.
To ensure the process is for remediation and not punishment.
Okay.
David, I'm curious because for the person to be placed on probation, it would have required to take an action by the board. Am I incorrect? So a board, it may not have been the board that you were on, but a board put somebody on probation.
No, I'm there's a number of cases, but I'm thinking back maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago,
Yeah.
where there was a licensee who she attended a party. She ended up having a couple of glasses of wine and ended up blowing a .08 on the way home. It was a one and done deal, and she got probation 3.5 years later for something that was long done and over. She never had a drinking problem before. She never had a drinking problem after. And I remember we were all sitting around after this was done and over saying, why the heck did anybody even pursue her? It could have just been a citation. It could have been any number of things. But probation really made no sense. And we granted her early termination of probation. And there have been a number of issues like that since I've been on the board, where we've just looked at it and said, why did this person even get put on probation?
But I guess my point is, the person got put on probation because the board put them on probation, right?
No, the board enforcement team put them on probation. We were the ones that ended up looking at it and deciding to terminate their probation on an earlier basis.
I'm still confused. Shar or Mark, does staff have the power to put someone on probation without board
If
action?
if I can just interject, this is Sheree.
Sheree, there you go.
Yeah, hi. So board staff conducts the investigation and Shara signs the accusation as our executive officer. But the final decision, the act of placing a licensee on probation, is done by the board. We send you a proposed decision in whatever format, and the board members as a body make the final decision whether or not they agree with us and want to do the action that we've suggested. So it is the board itself that puts somebody on probation. It's not us as staff.
I think Dr. Tretzky.
You're on mute.
Yes, thank you.
There's folks that have come before the board when I've been on the board. I mean, and they were coming for their 1 year was up and they wanted to have early termination of probation, like in 2017. And I've been on the board since 2013. And I know I have never, ever seen their case in the past. And maybe somebody's been on the board as long as I have. Sid, do you recall anything like that at any time? Because I know you've been there as long as I have.
I just remember this one case so well because it was the very first time she ever tried a glass of wine.
Yep, that's her. There was also one with an optometrist that we were talking about when we were in another location, and the guy was put on probation because he had missed a retinal detachment, which had happened. He examined the patient 6 months earlier, and the patient had a retinal detachment 6 months later, and he was put on probation. And I had never seen that case before because I never would have put him on probation. Absolutely not. He did nothing wrong. He did everything right, and he still ended up on probation. And I recall the professional members were asking each other, how did this happen? How did this guy get probation?
So if I could chime in here. So
yes, jump
on
in.
some of them, what I've, and Sheree, you can clarify, but what I believe sometimes happens is if there's an accusation, the accused can accept a stipulated settlement. And then it comes to us, and we are told that the accused has accepted the stipulated settlement, and it would be very rare for the board to not accept what the accused has agreed to. So I specifically know that last example that you gave, I'm pretty sure that was the situation, is the optometrist had accepted the agreement and we just said, okay, that's fine if that's what you want.
And perfect. You just explained my missing. Now I realize what I'm saying, why it's not making sense to Sheree. The board enforcement staff offered this as a stipulated settlement, and the respondent said, okay, I'll take it. Whereas, as far as I'm concerned, for those certain cases that we're discussing, a board expert, a professional expert, should be brought in on this to even before this even gets to the point of offering a stipulated settlement. I don't think that should have ever even occurred. There shouldn't have been a settlement on anything because the guy really didn't do anything wrong.
Okay, and for clarification, even for stipulated settlements, those still are approved by the board and the board members prior to being effective. And there is even for a stipulated settlement where both parties have made an agreement, you can still reject that settlement. And Will can probably give some more information about this, but you can reject it and send it to hearing or make a counter offer and send that back to the DAG. You don't have to accept a stipulated settlement just because the respondent has.
Sure. Can I explore that last statement because it'll help me understand the issue that we're trying to put in the strategic plan. So if there's a stipulated settlement, it's presented to the board. and the board rejects it because it's too
Right.
harsh.
Mhm.
What you said this before, but I don't understand. What are the options for the respondent? Because if the option for the respondent is, oh, I got to pay a lawyer and go to hearing, that is contrary to, I think, what the board would want to do. Can the board say, well, this stipulation, you've stipulated this, but we don't think you violated the law. We're going to can we say to the respondent and the DAG, we're going to reject this because we don't think you did anything wrong. Is that an option?
I don't know the technicalities of how it would work, but my understanding is that the options you have is either to remand the case back to hearing or present a counteroffer. So if your counteroffer wanted to be, hey, we don't think that we've proven the violation, and the counteroffer is going to be, we're going to withdraw the accusation or dismiss it without prejudice or what have you. I believe, and maybe Will can give some more information about this, but I believe that that is within your right as the board.
Yeah, this is Will, and I generally agree with what you're saying, Sri, but we're kind of getting into the area of some legal advice and things like that. I'd rather talk with you guys on a specific, if we're talking about the specifics of a case, we might want to do that in some other venue and try to get back to the strategic plan before and not kind of bring up previous specific cases, at least.
Well, but
be mindful.
Bring up, general examples because I don't know. It just seems that maybe I'm missing something for the last few years, but I just don't remember some of these cases that came before us for early termination of probation. I don't remember ever voting to approve any settlements.
Well, how about this? I think this discussion is important because it informs me on what to say in this in the strategic plan, and knowing how what the options are that board has when it comes to stipulated settlements is important. But that said, why don't we? My suggestion is to modify David's suggestion. And to say something like the action word is consider whether when and whether board staff should consult with a board approved expert on enforcement actions that could result in probation or revocation of a license.
Prior to any settlements?
I don't know. I don't know enough about this topic to say when that should happen. On one side, yes, prior to any settlement is a possibility, but on the other hand, in the worst case scenario, if board staff is so out of whack, and I'm not saying that board staff is, they should not be, we should not be bringing the accusation at all, right? But I don't know which cases those are, and I need to further explore this this topic, and that's why I would say, that's why I use the action word consider.
Yeah,
So
that's good. At least it brings it up.
Yeah, and this could be a lousy idea. Sorry, David, but I want to consider it.
Okay, good.
All right, so with the newly worded consider rather than consult, okay, and we can just keep the same benefit at the end?
To ensure
that
the
works?
process focuses on patient protection, patient protection and remediation, comma, not punishment.
Okay. All right.
All right.
And we can always disregard it.
Okay.
Any other suggestions for enforcement? Remind me, we've already covered inspection. Is that right? We're going to have a discussion on inspection later. There was an item here of improving working relationships with the Attorney General's office, Division of Enforcement, District Attorneys. It was indicated that it was completed, so.
And we do continue to have very frequent communication with our DAG liaison, as well as good relations between staff and those DAGs who are assigned to our cases. I feel that we are holding up our end of the bargain on those relationships as much as we can.
Okay. And so do you feel there's no need to include this in the objectives?
I do not believe so, no.
Okay. All right, are there any other enforcement objectives that people want to suggest? Do we want to, moderator, do you want to open this up to the public for their comment?
This is the moderator, and I will go ahead and open up the Q&A panel. So it is now available. So if anyone would like to make a comment, please type. I would like to make a comment in the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference.
As people, as the public is typing in or not typing in, one of the things I saw under enforcement, and I'm not sure where this goes, maybe we've already covered this, but the topic of folks getting contact lenses without a prescription, we mentioned this under law and regulation, right, as an item for discussion. Is my recollection correct? Okay. All right. I think it's the prior 3.1. No, or is it different? Is this different from 3.1? Professional members? I'm hearing no comment. Okay.
I don't understand your question, Mark.
So, is this law and regulation point, the first one, monitor federal law to identify methods that will strengthen existing California legislation regarding the sale of contact lenses and eyeglasses? Does that cover the complaint about folks getting contact lenses without a prescription?
I believe so.
Okay. Thank you. Moderator, do we have any comments from the public on enforcement?
We do not. Would you like me to go ahead and close the Q&A panel?
Yes.
All right, I will do that. Okay.
All right, next is
So would we
outreach.
like, yep.
I'll open up to the board members to suggest objectives for outreach.
I have some.
Okay.
Explore.
Okay.
Quarterly board WebEx continuing education webinars on laws and regulations with available question and answer sessions
Okay.
to expand, and it would expand outreach to licensees.
Okay, so that would be the benefit, to expand outreach to licensees. And then the first part of the issue was that WebEx educational courses.
Quarterly board WebEx continuing education courses on laws and regulations.
Okay.
I have more.
Okay.
Assemble case studies of how enforcement actions can impact the licensee. So what, why would be to show how DUIs, malpractice, unlicensed activity, what those consequences are.
Mm-hmm.
So what the consequences are of these types of activities.
Okay.
You know, people, you're an optometrist, you know, you had a couple too many drinks, you drive, you get a DUI. Oh, well, I pay my $10,000 and it's all done and over. Nobody ever expects that their license is going to get put on probation and they're going to have to be peeing in a cup for 5 years.
Okay.
So I think having case studies available, maybe on the board's website, would be valuable. And
Okay, so
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say making those available on the website would be a good item in an action plan. That's all I was going to say.
Okay. And what else did I scribble down here? Collaborate with continuing education providers such as optometry schools, excuse me, and professional associations to distribute updates on bills, statutes, and potential regulations. Darn COVID. To enhance licensee awareness of the current state of practice. A lot of this stuff is available on the board's website, or it's available on anybody that wants to look at board meetings online, which probably a good fraction of a percent of optometrists will ever do. But if we could distribute something at a CE meeting, or it would just be a way to get information out to the greatest number of optometrists with the least amount of resistance, or the easiest way to get the information out.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I've got.
All right. So are we good with what we have here? Does anyone want to suggest any additions or?
I have an addition.
Okay,
So
great.
one of the things that I noticed with the stakeholder feedback is the percentages that listed outreach and communication with the board poor. It was a pretty big disparity between staff, board versus stakeholders. And I do know that we've worked very hard to try to improve that. I believe prior to this last strategic plan, our involvement with online technologies, the website, social media, all those different aspects was less than it is now. However, it sounds like we still have continued opportunities. So with that said, if you look at 5.7, I would recommend modifying that to accelerate a communication plan utilizing technology to communicate more effectively with stakeholders, patients, and licensees by assigning, and this is, Shara, I'm going to look to you to clarify, because I think that we need to have a specific staff member where it's taking up a larger portion of their time to administer this. So I think that at every meeting, board meeting, we should hear about outreach. So I believe that we have a committee on this, and I think this is an important subject. So I think that we should hear every meeting from the outreach committee about new communications that have been implemented between board meetings. The benefit, and I know that was very long-winded, so the benefit is to improve or continue to improve utilization of new technology to enhance communication to licensees, registrants, and stakeholders.
Can I make a friendly amendment to the end and just
Yes,
broaden
please.
it to reach more Californians across all communities?
That's
So
beautiful.
that it includes those who are in areas that are underserved. It's areas where there may not be a lot of internet connectivity or whatever. Could we, yeah, because what you're saying is exactly what I have.
So, Shara, who does that now? It's you and Mark, right?
That is correct. The resources we have available for outreach are myself and Mark, and we have asked analysts in some positions to take on that in addition to their enforcement duties or in addition to their licensing. But we do not have currently a staff resource to take hold of that. When I took on the position, we did have authorization for an administrative analyst, and we were able to have that position handle some of the outreach with oversight by myself and Mark. But we are no longer authorized for that position, and so it is tertiary at best duty on my plate as well as Mark's. But I agree with board members that this was certainly a frequent comment. And so it is something that we should be concentrating on more. I have to also, though, question if this is about individual licensees and the communication they get about their applications or their renewals, as opposed to our larger outreach plans.
So are you suggesting a friendly amendment to also research where to? I don't think that we have enough volume, to be honest. Most large corporations dedicate teams for this kind of communication, and we don't have anybody. We don't even have a single person dedicated to it on our staff. So it could be where if we have this as a broad enough point, that it could lead to us potentially even asking for a BCP for additional staff. I mean, because it's ridiculous to have an EO, an assistant, to be trying to handle all the responsibilities plus something as important as outreach communication. So I just want to make sure that whatever statement we have for the strategic plan is broad enough so that as we continue to improve this, if we have to get to the point of a BCP to try to add staff, we have that flexibility. So is the current wording, do we think it's broad enough?
And the how to get it done for the action items, we should consider interns, communications interns, or those who are in the optometry field. Maybe we put a committee, add them to this committee for consult and execution. It's really reaching those who aren't being reached and asking what's the best way to reach them. Because we've tried number of ways, but we're not hitting the mark. And it's, to Glenn's point, we need a dedicated resource. So if not, is there a consultant to bring on? I don't know, but it's worth exploring. And accelerate is the apropos word.
This is the moderator. So for the benefit, do we want to change it to improve utilization of new technology to enhance communications to reach all Californians? Is that what we would like the benefit to say?
Well, can I say something? How about its communication plan, improving utilization of new technology, benefit to enhance communication to stakeholders, patients, etc. And to enhance communication under the benefit. Just reads a little bit better that way.
Okay.
So
what we can also change what was being proposed also, which is to reach all Californians, is fine to replace that with stakeholders, patients, licensing, registry.
So as she's typing that, I have a couple thoughts on my end. One is, do we want to include this or have as a separate line item an assessment of resources for outreach? Because accelerating the communication plan is probably the endpoint that we want to do, but it seems like, and maybe this is a task underneath that, is we need to figure out what our resources are, or state how bad our resources are, and to brainstorm about how to get other resources, interns, technology, whatnot, to enhance our outreach. So are they two different things, or is it kind of, is one subsumed in the other?
No, they are
So
two
that's
separate. They're two separate things because this is such a big opportunity for us that I think that we need to be able to make measurable steps forward, and I think it should be separate.
okay. The second observation is that the 55% for, let's see, hold on, outreach. I'm sorry, the Glenn, you were saying that was very poor in terms of our rankings on outreach. Was that by whom? With stakeholders, board members, or staff?
So there was a higher percentage of poor rating by stakeholders than by board and staff, I believe. I'm trying to re-pull it back up.
I've got it in front of me. So effective, the external stakeholders, 54% thought we were effective, 27% said we were poor, and 5% said we were very poor. So 32% gave us poor or less.
Yeah. Well, our own board management said we were poor under 55%. I mean, it's not a comment on whether we're doing a bad job. I think it's a comment on resources. That said, there is kind of a conflict in our mission, in that most of what we want to do is do outreach to consumers. This external survey didn't really survey consumers; it surveyed licensees. So it's and you know, if you have limited resources and you have to choose, I think we would provide outreach to consumers. That said, we used to have more outreach to the licensees. I think there was a newsletter or something like that every now and then. I'm not sure we have the time to do that. I'd like David's idea of telling licensees about enforcement actions. That's outreach to our licensees. In fact, as a lawyer, there used to be a law magazine put out by the State Bar of California. The first thing I'd turn to is the list of enforcement actions to see if I knew anybody and to hear the horror stories. So, I mean, David's suggestion is outreach in and of itself. So those are my comments. I have no objection to the outreach items that people have proposed. Do we have any more comment on these? Because there are some on the old strategic plan that I'd may want to include. I'm thinking we want to mirror over. Well, it's 5.8, but maintain a communication plan to raise awareness of the importance of children's vision, health, and wellness. We've put together some good videos. We have a few op-eds out there. Frankly, I'm a pessimist. I don't think we're ever going to get the children's vision bill through the legislature. So in lieu of that, to the extent we can let folks know how important a comprehensive eye exam is I think the best we can do.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And then 5.9, conduct an in-depth review of the board's website and update it. That was completed, but it's the kind of thing that we got to keep looking at because technology changes, websites get cluttered. I think remind me, have we gotten complaints about our website? I'm sure we have. Everyone complains about websites. So we can always improve it. And then I think unless we put it in our strategic plan, we're going to forget to review it.
I think it's part of the other two that we just worked on.
I'm sorry, Glenn, you got muddled over.
Oh, so I think that former one, what was it? I forget the number now. You just mentioned 5.9.
5.9, 5.9.
But I think that is encompassed with the other two new ones that we came up with a little earlier. I think what we have lacking is there's not dedicated people to look at, are we posting new things? Are we moving things around? So my example would be my son does social media marketing, not as a profession, well, kind of as a profession, as a part-time kind of thing. And he has so many followers, but to maintain the followers, you're basically posting things multiple times a day, sometimes unrelated to the specific thing that you're marketing, but you have to maintain interest in your audience. And I don't think that we look at the website often enough because we don't have necessarily the resources to do it, and possibly the content. And I think that those two things will be encompassed by the prior two new action steps that we created.
And Glenn, Dr. Kawaguchi, to your point, maybe the website isn't the place to do it. Maybe we need a Twitter, more activity on Twitter versus Facebook versus our website. I was just in the website and it's pretty dated looking. So we wouldn't be getting those who are coming out of the schools to follow us. I mean, Dr. You probably know better than all of us what it gets people excited about information.
Well, I just think that our social media presence is pretty minimal. So in order to reach the majority of younger people or younger docs or even just Californians in general, they all have some kind of social media. So I mean, we could have a link on the website, but you like Glenn's saying, we have to have someone that's going to maintain it. Can't post something on Twitter once a month and expect people to still follow you. But you know, we don't have to do it multiple times a day, but you know, once a day, a couple of times a week, but we need something like that. So I think, and we've talked about the importance of social media in the past. It's just that time for that. I think that's just something that we're going to have to explore because we do need to hire someone to enhance your social media presence and update the website would be even nicer. But you know, one thing at a time.
If I may, Mr. President, I just want to make sure that we are, of course, open to all of these ideas. And in fact, as many of you know, communication and public relations is my background. It's what I've done most of my career in campaign management. So don't worry, these things that you're talking about pay me every single day. But it also means that we, in hiring, need to have someone who is of an analyst background or an analyst qualification to make sure that this direct channel to our public continues to be appropriate, continues to be effective, and shows our organization in the best light. So while I am, of course, and always have been, campaign management, you use interns like nobody's business, but it still takes a qualified staff member to manage that and make sure that that communication, that direct communication to the consumers, to licensees, is appropriate, effective, and in keeping with our image as a state regulatory body.
Sure, I was just about to say something like that. I mean, yes, this is the public outreach discussion, and having great public outreach is important, but we need to have something to, we have to have something to say. I mean, I can increase our Twitter account by posting something really stupid every day, every hour. I know somebody who does that and is very successful at it, has, a couple million followers, and has great outreach, but I'm not sure that's our goal. So that's neither here nor there, really. I mean, we should increase our ability to conduct outreach, but Shara's point is a good one. All right, do we have any, why don't we open up the floor to public comment for any other comments about outreach and suggestions for additional objectives.
Okay, and we also need to write the benefit for this final objective we've got showing here. Conduct, I imagine it's something to the point of, to educate consumers or something to that effect, but we do need to write the benefit.
Well, it's so that the board has, so that the board can communicate to the aforementioned for up-to-date and accurate information about the board's practices and laws and regulations.
Okay.
And to ensure, compliance with all rules.
Okay.
Or about the health and safety of eye care through the optometry and opticianry practices, or so maybe it's, if I hear about rules and laws, I think we're going to lose them. Somehow we're going to need to spin it so it's of interest.
Sid, I don't disagree with your language, and let's just put it in. In my heart of hearts, I mean, it's not our job to talk about, the best type of contact lenses or, the best sink to wash your hands in. But anyway,
it's the timely information that's coming out of the regulatory process. It's about seasonal issues such as the colored contact lenses during Halloween. It's making sure as the school year starts to remind to go for the eye checkup for kids before they go into school, because seeing the board, or in this case, seeing the computer screen, impacts how the kids learn. Whatever some of those timely messages are. Yeah, to provide up-to-date and accurate information regarding, and to Mark's point, the regulatory changes, laws, etc.
Mm-hmm. In terms of outreach and licensing, do we have an outreach campaign when it's time to renew licenses, or when continuing education requirements are coming due, or anything like that? Is that kind of coordinated? Is there kind of thinking in tandem with those kind of annual requirements, Shara?
So because really and truly our licensing dates are throughout the year, except for on statements of licensure or fictitious name permits. Those all expire at the same time each year. And so we certainly do communication to our licensees regarding the need to update those or renew those licenses. But with individual licensees, of course, those happen each month according to the month that they first became licensed. So there isn't a particular campaign around the need to renew one's license, or the need to complete continuing education, in your biennial cycle or every 2-year cycle.
Okay, that's interesting. I know with lawyers, we get an annual notice saying you have to have your CLA requirements done by April 1st or something like that. So we get hit with that, and it's like, oh, yeah, the state bar, they're doing outreach. All right,
we
thank
have
you.
in the past, and many boards do outreach either by letter, or many have turned to postcard, so that when your license does come up for renewal, your postcard is immediately generated 60 to 90 days prior as an individual reminder. We have not been able to sustain that with printing budget, but it is something that we, of course, would like to be able to bring back at some point, so that there is clear communication. But we do also throughout the year include continuing education blurbs within our listserv emails and within our president's message so that folks are reminded that, of course, at their end of each cycle, they're required to do the requisite number of continuing education credits, or to attest to having done the requisite number of continuing education credits.
Okay, thank you. Moderator, do we have any public comment on this item? I think we opened that up already, right?
Yes, it has been open and no one has made, oh, we have one, I think. Nope, that was false alarm. We do not have any requests for public comment. Would you like me to go ahead and close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right.
All right, so moving on to the last item. Cheryl, were you talking?
Yes, sorry, it does appear that there was a public comment that wasn't registered quickly enough.
So why don't we go back? Moderator.
All right, so I have gone back and the only request I see for public comment was back at 1 o'clock. Not seen.
Okay. Well, if there's someone out there that wants to make a public comment on our outreach, please submit that again because we don't see it.
Committee Chair
Okay.
Adam Bentley just sent me a text and said he had a comment. So I'm
okay.
back up for him. Just a moment ago,
So
comment.
Okay, so Adam, you've been unmuted.
So sorry about that. I think I'm doing it right. So I just want to make a quick comment just about outreach when it comes to the RDO program, our registrants. But I know that we previously tried outreach and bringing awareness to registering with the state. That was something that we had worked on last year. But one thing I was thinking about is also like outreach to colleges, because we do actually have quite a few opticianry programs in the state of California. And I know similar states like Massachusetts, the board is very active with the opticianry college program. So if any outreach that we could think of, possibly the board interacting more with these opticianry programs within the state of California to bring more awareness about just registration.
And so just to, if I may, that is certainly something that we have been working on. Natalia, in her earlier role of single optician licensing resource, did begin to make contacts at each of the schools that provide those. We had a plan to do outreach to those, to do some visits, but have really been hampered by budget and the ability to effectuate any travel. We have worked our hardest to provide email information for them that can be sent out to students in order to alert them to the fact that ABO certification is not, in fact, California registration. We have identified those partners, but again, I've just kind of run into some difficulty with budget in order to complete those outreach opportunities.
I think that's important. Thank you, Adam. That's excellent. That's an excellent comment. Is there somewhere in our strategic plan, is it a task under the strategic plan where we can note this? Because I don't want to forget that issue as we look back at the strategic plan, 5 months from now or a year from now. Any suggestions?
I think it needs to be a additional line item. In Shara, it doesn't have to be in person. So if our budget doesn't allow in person to all the opticianry school programs, there could be obviously alternate communications that we could provide to the schools that they could distribute for us. whether it's electronic or paper or whatever we choose the alternate to be.
So, Cheryl, can you describe what you're trying to do, given your limited resources? And we'll put this in to
So
acknowledge
that's
that.
as Glenn mentioned. I mean, of course, in person's great, but we've been trying to do just exactly that: email communications that can be sent from the school itself. Unfortunately, though, we need a resource to draft and then communicate with those institutions. And unfortunately, that hasn't been possible with formerly Natalia, the only opticianry licensing resource, but now being the only resource for initial licensure for opticianry and optometry. It's just a matter of staff bandwidth and the ability to maintain those connections and give them new content on a schedule that is pertinent to the graduation of their students.
So it's communicate. The action might be communicate to opticianry schools about what? What are we communicating to them about?
Our outreach has been about the fact that ABO certification is not registration with the board, and that the professionals within California are not allowed to use the designation of optician if they are not, in fact, registered with the board. So it has been a communication of the need for registration in order to let folks know that practicing in California is not simply the passage of the ABO or the NCLE, but the registration with the board is what allows you to use the title of optician.
Okay, so communicate to opticianry schools regarding California registration requirements. To use the title optician. And then the benefit is to enhance compliance with California law.
Additionally, the benefit is encouraging registration. So one of the things I know that Ruby talked a lot about related to the DOC was that we needed to also find a way to encourage registration of opticians.
Sounds good. All right, do we have any more suggestions, comments on outreach? All right, let's move to organizational effectiveness. I open the floor up for board members to make some suggestions for objectives for organizational effectiveness.
So one of the comments that I would have that we didn't seem to have in our past strategic plan, I think it was on even a further back one, is development of staff. So I know that the DCA has not programs, but has documents or training to support the development of staff. And there were times in the past where it was questioned whether or not those tools were being utilized to their full extent. I think that will also assist in reducing turnover. If the staff knows that we care about their development and we are actually executing the tools that the DCA provides for the development, I think our turnover will be lower.
Okay, so this is a moderator. Would the action word be provide, maybe, or and
Yes.
then provide tools or training to staff?
Provide tools and training for staff development.
Okay. So tools and training for staff development. And then to support the growth of staff. Just
Support the growth and retention.
okay. Of the growth.
Of staff.
Okay, to support the growth and retention of staff.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any comment or edits to that from the board? Okay. Any other suggestions? I'm sorry, David, is that you?
Yeah, it's me. I don't know if this fits in with what Glenn has or if it's a separate category. But I had a couple of things here. One would be to arrange annual in-service training. In-service meaning just training, but annual in-service training on eye conditions, state of practice, whatever, education, etc., for optometrists and opticians. And the reason would be to ensure that the staff has an understanding of what the professions are about. That's not the right word, but we can wordsmith that. But I'm not sure if that's something that goes in with what Glenn has for tools and training of staff development.
No, what I had in mind is different, actually, Dave. So I was thinking more about their personal job development,
Okay.
leadership development. So I think that is different.
Yeah. So I mean, I've done this a couple of times for the staff in the office, with just doing a basic presentation of common eye conditions, so they have an idea of, you know, when somebody's talking about glaucoma, what are they talking about? So something like that might be worthwhile. The other thing I was going to bring up was research office visits to various licensees. So maybe having staff go out of the office for a day, a quarter, a day every year, or whatever, and just spend several hours with a licensee, whether it's optometry or opticianry, to see how that person or see how that business actually functions. So more of a hands-on idea of what they're regulating. With the same reason, to ensure that the staff has an understanding of what the professions actually do or what they're about. So considering that my brain's starting to turn to mush, you guys can help me wordsmith that stuff.
Well,
Thank you.
We don't need to do wordsmithing here. The solid folks can do the wordsmithing. I think those are excellent ideas, David. They're fantastic ideas. Do we have any comments or edits to David's suggestions? All right. Any other board suggestions?
Regarding organizational effectiveness, is that referred to actual board members in addition to staff?
Yes.
Because I think the obvious thing here is we've been operating with a less than full board for quite some time now. So I think one of our priorities needs to be to recruit or elect new board members.
Isn't that really the responsibility of the state, whether it is the assembly, the governor's office, or the Senate?
Do we play any part in that?
Nope.
Well, I mean,
support the recruitment of or election of support. I don't know.
Sid. I mean, if I, as gubernatorial appointees, couldn't we see if there was, reach out to our networks and find someone and suggest them to the governor's office?
I don't know if that's strategic plan level, though. I mean, it's not just that. They have to go through, point them towards the application process. That's just in general what you should be doing. But I hear what Dr. McIntyre is saying, but we really aren't in a position to imply that we're the recruitment team on behalf of the governor, our senators, and our assembly folks. We're all appointees.
Solid, folks. Do other boards have anything about recruiting new board members?
This is Moderator. I have not seen it before. So I don't know if you would want to maybe advocate, if there's a way that you can advocate for it, but I haven't seen it as an objective before.
I like the word advocate. I think Deborah is right when we're short on board members, so the organization should do everything it can to get more board members on this board.
What can we do?
Well, if we have one less after this, we won't even have quorum.
I mean, I'll tell you what I've been doing as president. I mean, for example, I've been advocating to anybody who would listen to me that Ruby should have been reappointed, and wrote a couple letters to that effect. I haven't heard anything back from them, but we were, I am advocating, and if we don't get any more appointments, I'll try to advocate more.
We held appointments training for a group and network within Google, and I had over 200 attend. But that's not, I can't force a governor, a legislator, et cetera. You just get them into the pipeline, and when our legislators or governors are ready to appoint, they do. They just have the priorities, or maybe the EO just needs to call the governor's office and remind them that we're down to 2 people, or whatever it is. Mark, you can call too.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know if it's of the strategic plan level. That's all I'm saying.
So this is the moderator, and as you were discussing, the co-moderator has typed in the issue, and then the benefit could be to fill vacancies on the board in a timely manner, or but how does it look as an objective? Does that seem reasonable?
The language is accurate. I think the primary question we need to make is whether this rises to the level of being a strategic plan item.
I don't think it is. I mean, in the past, we've had more people on the board. I think this is a weird period right now. So but I think putting this in the strategic plan is, I don't think it really rises to the level of putting it in the strategic plan.
Okay. So that's you and Sid with that opinion. I'm indifferent. Any other thoughts?
I'm in agreement with, so I do agree with Dr. McIntyre that when we get this low, it's an organizational problem. However, I don't think that it's our problem specifically as part of our strategic plan.
Okay, let's take it out then.
So Mark Johnson, or Shara, let's say that for some reason one of us suddenly can no longer serve on the board. What happens? Say we're down to 5 members and the board cannot establish a quorum. What happens at that point? I mean, things will still be occurring, but the board can't make any decisions.
And I think that board counsel is most apt to speak to that. Will, if you would make a comment?
Well, your quorum is set by statute at 6. So if you don't have 6 members appointed, legally you can't take any official actions.
So I'm assuming, though, that that business would still go on for the most part as usual until we could establish a quorum, right?
Well, it depends what you mean by business as usual, but for example, anything that requires a motion and a second and a vote, I mean, we probably wouldn't even get there because we wouldn't have a quorum. I mean, I'm kind of, just giving it to you straight here. I think this underscores the need to do what you guys are talking about and get more, to advocate for getting more members. But that's kind of there's no exception for if you don't have a quorum, you can do this.
So I'll ask one other thing along those lines. Because of the governor's declared state of emergency, can the governor say that you don't need a quorum to function?
Yes.
So we do have a way around it if somebody was to vanish from the board.
Yeah, technically we could issue a waiver request to the governor's office, and that's would probably be delegated down to DCA at the DCA level, and the director of DCA could issue a waiver of the quorum requirement during the pandemic.
Okay. If that's a viable option for a desperate situation, I don't think we have to add anything to the organizational effectiveness.
So I don't know if this reaches the level of a strategic plan, but let me offer it. That each objective, assign would be the action word, each objective in the strategic plan to a board committee for work and monitoring. I feel badly that I'm looking at this progress report from last time only for the first time in so many months today. And I think the committees should be empowered to keep an eye on these objectives rather than the full board and rather than just staff. And rather than just having staff work on these objectives, that the committees work on them too, to the extent they can. And not us telling staff, do X, Y, Z, and 10 other things. I think we can probably contribute to looking at some of these things and working on them. And we have. But anyway, is that a strategic plan kind of item, or is this, or is it more kind of the devil in the details?
This is the moderator. You could make it an objective, but it also it's more of an action step. So typically the objectives are broken down into steps, and those steps are assigned to board staff, but there's no reason why, if you'd like it to form a committee for each objective, there's no reason why that couldn't be included as a step, an action planning step.
Okay. Let's then take, yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's within your power to do that as it is. So it was your idea. If you want to implement that, then as board president, you can do it.
Oh, I feel so powerful. I did note, I think in the roles of the officers that, hold on, I'm pulling it up now. I think the vice president is responsible for something regarding the strategic plan.
That's true.
Oh, is it? Okay. I had only seen that for the first time yesterday. Serves as the board's strategic planning liaison with staff, and it shall assist staff in the monitoring and reporting the strategic plan to the board. All right. Do we have any other suggestions for organizational effectiveness from the board members? Can we open up the floor to members of the public?
Yes, and I will go ahead and open the Q&A panel, so that is now available. And let me just add, the last time that comment I missed, it was because it had been typed in the chat field, not the Q&A panel, and that's my fault for not closing the chat. So that's how that got missed. But now we have the Q&A panel open, and if a member of the public would like to make a comment, please type. I would like to make a comment and submit it to all panelists, and we are displaying instructions for your reference. All right, Adam Bentley would like to make a comment. So Adam, you've been unmuted.
Just a super quick comment. Just I'm thinking, like, obviously we wanted to replace Ruby as an optician on the board, and since opticians do represent such a large population, maybe this would be a strategic plan, but maybe thinking about the demographics of our board and maybe a little bit more representation, if there was even possible for 2 opticians to be on the board, just since we are such a large population, and so I know we can't control getting people on the board, but thinking about, if possible, opening up maybe 2 spots for opticians.
That might be regulatory.
It would require a change in the statute.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now the statute specifies 1 optician on the board.
I mean, Adam raises an interesting and provocative idea, because if we keep the board at 11, it would mean one of our positions would be eliminated, be it a public member or a optometrist member. I mean, we should think about it. You know, we can always make a legislative proposal suggesting that. I'm not sure where the board is on that proposal. I'm not sure we have any consensus yet on the board as to that proposal to put it into the strategic plan. So I'm not sure what to do with that suggestion. It's a reasonable suggestion to make.
But it's an agenda item, not a strategic plan item. It's for a future board meeting. I don't know if we're even able, legal counsel's on, if we're even able to discuss it.
Well, it's whether or not we want to. I guess the strategic plan item is whether or not we want to discuss it in the future, and whether or not it goes in the strategic plan or not, we can discuss. We can decide that later anyway. So, do we have any suggestions or? Go ahead.
I was going to say, just to go along with Adam's statement, when the board was enacted in the Optometry Practice Act, it was just optometrists. So maybe now that it is opticianry and optometry, maybe we do need to expand to either maybe just expand the board to 13 members instead of 11 members and add an additional optician and maybe an additional public member.
I thought we were already one of the largest boards, and people have made comments that we have so many people on our board for the number of optometrists and opticians that were.
Well, maybe we get rid of an OD and we just add on an optician. We see if we can get that into statute. That'll make a lot of people happy on one side and a lot of people annoyed on the other.
As I sit here now, I'm not ready to put it in the strategic plan for a whole bunch of reasons.
All right. Let me throw out one more thing under this strategic plan then with organization. And I could be speaking out of turn here, but one thing that has come up, Shar or Mark, do we need to put in there the dealing with the DCA to see if our budget is actually sufficient for what we need? Because I know we're always understaffed.
I think that should be an important initiative for the board. We have grown by 3 staff members in taking on the opticianry profession, but have twice as many registrants. And although we have grown 3 positions, those are all in enforcement and in licensing, there has been no addition to administrative staff. So some of the concerns we've talked about today as far as outreach to the potential optician licensees, we didn't grow our administrative staff in order to try to handle those or cover those things. So I think that it would be of value to I hate to say it, but look at a widget study or do the other analyses that would validate that, in fact, our growth in registrants and work has exceeded what the original statutes or what we were originally allotted in taking on the opticianry program.
So it's something like communicate with DCA leadership the challenges and benefits of expanding the board's budget with the benefit of what would the benefit be?
I mean, I think it's to the benefit of better growing registration within opticianry, better enforcing opticianry laws. I think that overall, we've talked several times today about the need for additional staff resources and licensing. We haven't talked about the fact that we have only one analyst assigned to enforcement within opticianry, and then that there wasn't an increase to administrative staff in order to oversee both programs. So I think that there is an overall need for us to determine if we're able to meet our objectives with our current staffing ratio, our current staffing allotments.
Okay.
Well, I challenge the action word communication. I think we need a different word there. I'm not sure.
Your challenge is accepted.
Because it's not about us just communicating with DCA leadership. I already know what they're going to say. They're going to say submit a BCP. Isn't that correct? Okay, so communicating to the DCA leadership is not really enough. We need to
beg, plead.
So request is fine word. So request a fund analysis. I like that. Okay, I like that.
So is that enough on this item? Cheryl, you have us in your hands. Is that what you want us to say?
I really want to defer. I was so very thankful that you, President Mordomi, and Vice President Kawaguchi were very much a part of our budget discussions at the end of last year. I think as we were developing, it must have been as we were developing the 2021 budget. And so I think that is what we came down to and what we heard from our budget analysts, that in order to substantiate those increased positions to get the work done, we need to certify that we indeed have more work than can be done by the folks or the positions that were allotted. We continue to work multiple desks. So, the person who is our lead enforcement analyst also handles intake of all of the enforcement complaints. So she is logging in all of the enforcement complaints and then is also responsible for the most complicated enforcement cases. We've got Mark, and this is mostly just a shout out to staff, I guess, really and truly, because they, even through the pandemic, they've worked so incredibly hard. Mark is, fulfilling the role of our policy analyst so that he is preparing materials for the, he's working with other staff members to bring their memos together. He's getting materials out to board members. That's really two positions. One has been our admin analyst position and his own position, along with, as you heard today, he's got outreach on his task list as well. We continue to take up double duty. And so I think that as we talk about those processing times, we've really got to be thoughtful about what we ask of our staff, our processing times, and whether or not that has to do with our turnover as well. If it is that we're just asking too few people to do too much. I think that all of that is a strategic objective that the board should take on.
Okay, so is this request for a fund analysis consistent, and does it encapsulate that effort?
I believe so. I think that as we take these back and refine these, we can likely, of course, within the strategic plan work group, have some conversations with DCA executive, maybe get a little clearer on what that request really looks like, so that maybe we can make this less broad and do this with more specificity. But I think that for now in this first draft, I think that definitely does encompass what we're looking for and could be clarified.
Okay. All right. Do we want to open this? Well, we've already gotten comments from the public. Do board members have any other suggestions?
Where are we going for dinner?
Your house. All right. Hearing none, I think that concludes, I hope, our discussion on this first draft of the strategic plan. Am I correct, Ms. Moderators?
We have one more slide, and what we do is we total up the number of objectives and ask, and I've already, a co-moderator, I already have the number, so you don't have to get them. I'll just give them to you to type in. We just like to let you know. So for licensing, we have 5 objectives. For examination, we have 2. For law and regulation, we have 11. For enforcement, we have 3. And then for outreach, we have 9. And organizational effectiveness, we have 5, which gives us a total of 35. And so knowing that you have 35 objectives, how many years do you think it would take to complete those objectives? And generally people choose between 2 to 5 years.
How many objectives did we have in the last strategic plan? Do you have that available?
Let me see if I can look at that. Hold on. Okay. I am paging through the old plan as we speak here. Sorry, let me mute myself so you don't hear a windstorm.
I have 43.
Yep, yes, 43. That is exactly correct.
Madam Moderator, might I ask if, and the board to consider, if 2020 is the correct year to start this plan? We'll continue to refine these objectives with the hope that the board will approve a final strategic plan in October. But I think that this really encompasses the work that we intend to do in 2021. But I'm not sure how the board might feel, or if you have a thought about that change.
I think you're correct, because your old plan is 2017 through 2020, so it would make sense to start your new plan 2021, and then however long you want to make it for. So, and if you don't want to decide yet, if you want to wait till you refine it and edit it, that's fine too.
Why wouldn't we use the whole 5 years?
It's entirely up to you. Yeah, some boards choose 2 years, some do 3, 4, 5 is usually the top amount of years.
if we chose like 2 years, then 2 years from now we'd be back doing this again, right?
That is correct.
All right, can we conclude this item?
Sure. If you aren't ready yet to say how many years you want to spend on it, then that's fine. Or you could just say 5. It's up to you.
I'm willing to sit and digest this before I
Okay.
put a
Okay.
number of years on it.
Okay.
Mr. President, I just want to, perhaps it might be something that could be mulled over more by the strategic planning work group that we continue to reference. Maybe it would be appropriate for us, before we end this item, to appoint a few members to that work group to consider that question and the others that we've raised today.
Sounds fine. Who wants to be on the strategic plan work group? Let's see. I think I have to be because I'm president. Let's see now. Do I have any other volunteers?
I'll do it if you need somebody.
Thank you, David. Dr. Wong or Dr.
We can only have 2.
Oh, we only have 2. So it's you and me, huh?
Yeah, unless somebody else wants to do it instead. I haven't still looked at the job description and the benefits and the payroll, so I don't know if I want to stay on this.
No, you're on it.
All right. I'm stuck with David
all
then.
you and Mark.
I'm stuck with David. Very good. All right. Does that conclude this item?
It does as far as just the strategic planner is concerned, because you won't vote on this until we have an approved draft that's been crafted. So, and that'll be at your October meeting.
Very good. All right. Well, let's conclude this item, take a 5-minute break, and then we need to convene into closed session, I believe.
Also, I apologize. Apologize, Mr. President. Could we also do a future agenda items, giving the public an opportunity to comment on those before we break into closed session?
If that is your suggestion, I have no objection to it.
Are we going to put off the other items till tomorrow?
Yes, we will take those items up tomorrow.
So we're going to take up future agenda items. Okay, if you want to do that today, I'll open the floor up to suggestions as to future agenda items from board members.
I'm just going to say something silly here, though, because I don't know, and maybe we need Will to verify it, but are we allowed to put these issues off till tomorrow since they were noticed for today's meeting? And I know it's a 2-day meeting, but they were noticed for today.
Well, we can take them out of order. I guess we could check with the members of the public if there are any members of the public who were planning to comment on those items that we're holding over to tomorrow. We could let them comment now, or if they feel very strongly, we can take those items up now. But I guess that would be the fix there.
Good. Okay.
Well, as the board members are contemplating future agenda items, why don't we open the floor up to members of the public who want to suggest future agenda items for this agenda, or who want to speak on any agenda items on the schedule for today, but would like to make a comment today and not tomorrow.
All right, this is the moderator, and I've opened up the Q&A panel, and if any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type, I would like to make a comment. in the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. So I am seeing no requests for public comment at this time. Would you like me to go ahead and close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, thank you.
I noticed future agenda items appears twice, one today and one for tomorrow, but it is what it is. Do any members have any future agenda items they want to suggest at this time? Very good. So can we close the public session of this meeting and reconvene in the closed session?